Definitely spent a lot of time in the woods here. Definitely, did some trail building and that kind of thing. We'd always get our Christmas tree out in the back. Making the big logs, I'll buck up a section just like you might be making firewood. Fits my work process using the spoon mule and draw knife. I'm very happy that I made it back to working with my hands and that kind of thing.
The What's Your Craft Show, quenching your thirst for inspiration. Let's get inspired.
All right. Well, welcome to the What's Your Craft Show. We're here to quench your thirst for inspiration and our viewers' thirst for inspiration. So today we have Dawson Moore of Michigan Sloyd. Why don't you give just a brief introduction?
Yeah, I'm Dawson. Business is Michigan Sloyd. Sloyd's a Scandinavian word. It's pretty much means woodcraft and has an interesting kind of philosophy behind its education and that kind of thing. And but yeah, my main thing is carving spoons in the Sloyd tradition.
Great. So explore that a little bit more. I was curious because I was reading on your website. It says Sloyd is a Scandinavian-based handcraft movement and educational system. Yeah. And also that it focuses kind of on producing stuff that is, functional. And right. So I wanted to, if you could explore that a little bit more, like what is...
Yeah, it was kind of like it might almost be like a mix of home ec and wood shop, I would say. So a traditional focus would have been on woodworking, but it also incorporated textiles and maybe ceramics and stuff. It was more the teaching philosophy and how it was applied kind of idea, and it was actually a part of American education system for quite some time. But it's
like the public school systems?
Yep, the public school systems had Sloyd, at least in parts of the country, and it just fell out of favor. I don't know, I want to say it was the turn of the century, something like that.
So with the Sloyd itself, though, what is the educational philosophy?
It is, I'd say it's a more hands-off approach. Like the instructor would never touch what the student was working on.
Really, that's interesting.
And the idea was to teach a sense of like a little bit of self-reliance and a lot of building a sense of quality. So like a self-realized sense of quality, like that you kind of have your own internal standards and stuff of what craftsmanship is to you and that kind of thing. And then the focus would be more, certainly there's some decorative elements, but usually those would be worked into or a part of like a functional item like spoons or cups or bowls or maybe buttons or coat hooks or just different things like that.
So I wanted to talk about that a little bit more, but I also realized we rushed ourselves and we're going to get parched.
Yeah. So a couple things, actually.
So if we want to crack a beer here to get rolling.
Well, first of all, let's back up a little bit. We did forget, just for the audio, to introduce ourselves again. We're here with Peter Manthei here, co-founder of Beards. Obviously, Dawson introduced himself. I'm Steven, the in-house artist at Beards Brewery. So, yeah, Peter, go ahead. Like you're saying, making my mouth water now. So
grab a beer.
Choose a beer. We like to do what we like to crack one as we get into our conversation here. Looks like he's going with an armadillo. Solid choice. I'm going with a dog man because it just came out.
Head up this
I actually got one right over here.
It's tasty.
Cheers. Good to see you.
Cheers.
Good to see you. Thanks for having us.
Cheers.
Should also be. This might be a good time to let you know where we're at. Is this considered Harbor Springs, or are we like just north of Harbor Springs?
No, well, we're not in the city limits, but
Yeah.
I'd say this is still.
So I'll say we're just north of Harbor Springs, Michigan here, across the Little Traverse Bay from where our pub sits. So just to kind of set the scene, let you know where we're at. Let's get back to that talk about the...
Yeah, so I was wondering a little when I was reading just briefly about the Sloyd technique and with your stuff in particular. We had hosted you at the pub, and so I bought a couple of your spoons and been cooking with them, and I was surprised at how strong it was, that a lot of the work is very fine, and so I was thinking, like some of the weak points, right, like where the handle comes to that, I was like, that could be dangerous, but like I found them very durable, and I noticed you use a lot of like, angles and like that. I'm wondering how much of that is a function of making it unique and beautiful, and how much that adds to like the strength of the tools.
Because Sloyd's supposed to be something that you can use in everyday life, correct?
Yeah,
Is that correct?
usually there's a focus on that.
We were talking about this earlier this morning. So part of what Peter's talking about is like he has a nice Japanese knife he got, right? Well, he only busts it out when he feels like he can give it adequate attention to what he's making and stuff. So he's looking at the pieces he purchased from you in the same manner. Yeah.
Well, the part of it is, part of the design elements have traditional thought behind them. A lot of the reason it's so strong but looks, fine and a little bit slight in areas is because I'm starting from the log and splitting it out following the grain. So you have the full structural integrity of the straight grain when you start in that way. And if it looks kind of skinny in one dimension, it might be a little thicker in the other dimension. And so there are elements that are very traditional based. It's kind of a starting point. And then some of the details like you were describing.
The bevels and stuff.
The bevels and angles, and I call them, they're called stop cuts, where there's acute angles that meet at a, rather than being scooped out or a smooth transition, it's a hard stop.
Like where the handle of a spoon comes into
meets the bowl. And that was partially a design choice, and partially it fits my work process using the spoon mule and draw knife. Since the draw knife's a larger tool, it can't make some of those tight curves, but it can do those stopped cuts where they meet right at the same point. Yeah. It can do those.
Is the draw knife a traditional tool of Sloyd, or Sloyd can be a technique you use without draw knives?
It can be, yeah. A lot of the main, when you're first learning, a huge focus is just on the axe and Sloyd knife, just the little short straight bladed knives, and that kind of gives you a really good foundation and understanding of how the edges interact with the wood and that kind of thing. But I think it's really open to interpretation and open to a wide variety of tools. And yeah, certainly a draw knife would have been widely available throughout the last several hundred years, and I think it's just as legitimate as a handheld knife and things like that. Yeah, it's really just one big blade with two handles instead of one handle.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
We'll throw some shots in the video of that. We have shots of you doing that, so people that might not be familiar, and if you're listening just on your podcast, consider watching the video to see some shots of what Sloyd techniques and draw knives are all about. I find the balance that Steve and I were talking just a little as we were preparing for this. He had referenced my Japanese knife, and it's cool like that there's so much function in the tool. Like it looks cool, so you're like, oh, it's special, I should only use it for certain things. But I think then as I've used it, I'm like, well, this isn't like, because it looks beautiful is not an indication of its like
durability.
Yeah, durability.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's fine in design, but it's not like weak in design, right?
Yeah.
And that's a big part of Sloyd, right? Because you can make pretty things that
Yeah,
just break.
it's a little bit, but it's they'll take on their own character, and that's actually a lot of what people are drawn to about it, is that the spoon will change a lot over time. I tried, it's not like they break down, but for instance, if you use the same little teaspoon to stir your coffee every morning, it'll definitely get a nice dark patina. It'll take on those dark oils from the coffee, and it can end up making the spoon way more beautiful. It'll highlight certain facets and show different highs and low spots in the carving and that kind of.
It's like that with leather. Like I have this leather bag, and this company that makes like full grain leather. So it has all the imperfections, saddleback leather, and they're like, it's the first day you got it is probably like the least beautiful day, because it's like as it patinas and ages with wear. I mean, the part of that is like it looks beautiful. The other part of it is the stories and things of the bag being durable enough to go places with you, and you have that bag for your lifetime, right? Yeah. So you think about these things, you travel with it, or what you all did with the bag. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. And a lot of our spoons we use upstairs some of them are going on 4 and even 5 years old now, and just still holding up great. They look a little different, but they're.
And we should say upstairs is your house. You built this. The workshop we're in here is actually workshop in the basement, house upstairs. So that's pretty cool. You took the extension of building useful things all the way to building your own house.
Yeah.
And we're sitting on, correct me if I'm wrong, 6th generation family farm? Or?
Yep, that's correct. Yeah.
So
our kids are the 6th generation.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you'd be the 5th.
I'm the 5th. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yes.
And you grew up in Gaylord, Michigan.
Yep.
Which is roughly an hour south of here,
yep.
right? Something like that. So, do you have memories of building anything coming to this farm as a child? Did you come up here and run the woods and make forts with cousins and any of that kind of fun stuff that all of us kind of do as kids?
Definitely spent a lot of time in the woods here. Definitely, did some trail building and that kind of thing. We'd always get our Christmas tree out in the back.
Do you do that now that you live here? You guys harvest Christmas tree from
here?
Yeah,
okay. Every year. Yeah.
How many acres are you sitting on roughly here? Just so people can get an idea. We walked it with you about a couple months back, but
it's mostly there's about 60 acres of woods back there. Yeah, it's a nice. It's very lucky to be able to have that, especially for the kids and stuff.
Yeah,
be taking walks and stuff.
It's got to be neat to. I know I have 2 sons, so it's got to be neat to like walk. Literally for you here, you're like walking through the areas that you did as a child too. Now you're sharing those same experiences with them, and then here you are making a living off the land.
Yeah, and and my mom especially talks about that a lot. Like she used to play in this meadow where the house is a lot as a kid and that kind of thing.
That's wild. Yeah.
Was the family farm? I mean, 6 generations back is quite a while back. Was there an element of in the past, like the older generations building probably a lot of their own tools and things that they worked with, huh?
I wish I knew. I wish I knew more about that. All I have is I can go into the old barn and find some, like the saw, for instance, is probably my great grandpa's, and there's in my grandma's basement. There's a lot more like carpentry and kind of furniture, cabinet making type tools and stuff that were my grandpa's. And I know my grandpa had a reputation for kind of building whatever was needed around the farm, whether, he was kind of a jack of all trades as far as...
So did some of that inspire you to get going with this? And like how did you get going on Sloyd, and how did you kind of land on spoons? Like we're starting with spoons and...
It started out in California. We had been out there until about 5 years ago, and I had just carved maybe a few spoons before we moved back here. And we moved back to while we were building our place here and the shop and stuff, we were actually staying in the old farmhouse my mom grew up in. And it has this really nice front porch that was perfect for setting up a little carving stump and sitting out there. And then in California, it was very difficult to source wood. And then moving back here, it was suddenly, an infinite supply of whatever I wanted.
So really. What led you to that first spoon? Were you already woodworking in other realms outside of that?
I was just starting to I was more thinking I would go into furniture making, and I was acquiring tools and some knowledge to do that. And the spoon carving just kind of popped up amongst the blogs and stuff I was reading of other furniture makers. And it really is the type, it sounds very specific, but it's kind of like this common denominator place to start in woodworking.
The spoon shape.
Yeah, it's just because it's not necessarily the spoon itself. It's just that it's so good at teaching some of the fundamentals. Going back to that axe and knife as the fundamentals, it's a good exercise to learn both of those. You just go collect a little branch or something. You can use a little pruning saw. You don't need a special saw or anything to get just a little chunk of wood, and you can split it with a hatchet and start carving away a little bit, and you end up with something functional. And the spoon just happens to be, it's very three-dimensional, so it's a great entrance to the whole woodworking thing. You learn about collecting wood, what species you can use. You learn all about how to follow the grain. You learn a lot about form. You learn the axe and knife essentials. And so it's just like this great starting point for all other woodworking.
So talk about that a little bit more, talk us through, since a lot of people won't be familiar with the process, maybe just give us a brief overview of how you start, how you choose the wood, how you would choose, how you're looking at it and understanding the grain, and then just maybe a 30, 45 second overview of making a spoon for people.
Well, now since I do mostly production work, trying to do as many spoons as I really can with my time, I'm looking for, that's one thing. People might start out and pick branches with bends and things in them you can follow. You can pick a branch with the
grain's already bent, essentially.
The bend you want the final object to have, and I don't have the luxury to do that now. So I'm searching out kind of the opposite. I want a big log, diameter, 18-inch, something like that, with really straight grain, because then it's very predictable. It means if I make up 100 spoon blanks, I know, which direction I can carve in kind of every time, and it makes it a lot more predictable. But you're still using all those same lessons about how the grain works, and because you can only make cuts going one. It's like petting a cat. It's like their hair wants to go one way. You learn that about wood grain too. You can only work it from one direction essentially. And that's what I'm looking for now, is nice, straight, predictable grain.
Because you're taking those big logs and breaking them into your small starters.
Taking the big logs, I'll buck up a section just like you might be making firewood, and then split it out. Again, just like you might split up firewood, I'll have kind of specific ways of doing it depending on what I want to carve that day. And then just go from there. It's a lot of axe work, getting it prepared for the rest of the carving. And that kind of thing.
So I think, for you, you even touched a little bit on, there's an element of production, getting it done, making enough spoons. But something that I find pretty interesting, is like at what point is the mass produced? Like, why put the hand effort into it, right? Versus the mass produced. I mean, have you thought kind of about that? It's a philosophical question somewhat, but I think obviously I have my thoughts on it, but I'm not going to do a diatribe. I'd love to hear what you have to say.
I try to keep that pretty simple, and it's how I want to spend my time in the shop day to day. Yeah. And so I have certain tools that I really like working with, and I just try to maximize my time with those tools, and minimize my time doing the stuff I don't like. I have, one thing I've incorporated in the past year or so is I will use a bandsaw to cut the profiles of my spoon, whereas before I was doing 100% axe, like all hand tool. But the bandsaw, it's not necessarily a lot faster, but it saves my body a little bit of wear and tear, and more importantly, I get more efficient use out of the log. I can get, whereas I would have been a lot more wood goes to waste. When you're just axing it out, it'll end up being chips on the floor. And using the bandsaw lets me get more. So that I get a little time increase there, instead of the time it takes me to get one blank, all of a sudden the same time I will have 4 or 5 spoons out of the same chunk of wood kind of. So it is a balance. So I certainly have to consider how much time it takes me, but like I don't want to stand in front of machines all day. I try to avoid dust as much as possible. I don't want to continually expose my lungs to wood dust like on a daily basis. So that's a reason I like to carve. All of my finished surfaces are carved rather than sanded.
That's an interesting note that could easily be overlooked when you feel these spoons.
Yeah, they're super smooth.
They're so smooth. How do you get that from just carving? There's no sanding involved.
No sanding at all, and that's just from really sharp knives.
Say sharp blades.
Really
sharp blades.
And that's become really a huge. It's almost one of the most important parts of the trade is learning how to sharpen. I mean, I've spent hundreds of hours teaching myself to sharpen proficiently enough to, get those kind of surfaces repeatedly.
You have a plethora of knives over there.
Yeah, I do.
So many different kinds and shit. And each serves a single purpose, probably, huh? I mean, to a certain degree, it's probably like a set of wrenches that are different sizes.
A little bit. Again, going back to the fundamental axe and Sloyd knife, the basic straight knife. The cool thing about those is they're very universal. You can create kind of an absurd amount of things with just those 2 tools. And then anything else added on top of that gets more specialized, like you were saying, where it might have less and less uses, but some of those could be, really beneficial for key parts. And that's where some of my efficiencies and things like that would come in, would just be having the exact right tool for a certain job. Whereas something a little bit more general purpose might take me more time or give me a little more fuss than something more specialized.
Are a lot of... Oh, go ahead, Pete.
I was just if you had something specifically on the tools.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask about most of these knives that you have. I mean, there's not like a manufacturer out there that's mass producing them, is there?
It's a little bit of a mix.
There's a part of the community that's producing them. Because I know you produce some things, whether it's plans or like your spoon mules.
Yeah, it's a good mix. There is a company in Sweden that has been mass manufacturing some of the most well-known knives for I think over 100 years. Okay. And some of those are great and can be used, at a professional level, all the way from beginner to professional. And then, as I've progressed, I've gotten to know there is a good handful of other tool makers in the carving community that make some more specialized, a little higher quality steels, that kind of thing. Just sometimes I even get to, make special requests to suit my needs specifically, and that kind of thing. So that's
so you actually you commission a knife to be made essentially from.
Yeah, or it'll be kind of a collaborative effort where, like I might have some tips. It's kind of a back and forth. Like I might get something that, or have a few requests of my own, and they might have some ideas to add to that or improve on those ideas, and then maybe other people might like that tool, that kind of thing. So it can end up being a kind of a neat collaboration, because a lot of the tool makers are carvers themselves as well, so they kind of like
practitioners are normally the best reference when it comes to how something should be when it comes to a tool. Have you found yourself with knives? Ever since I was young boy, you wanted a pocket knife or something.
Oh yeah.
So have you become sort of a collector too? Do you have
Yeah.
More than one of the same knives just because they're cool and just because you can visualize the handle you'll make for the blade or whatnot.
Yep. Yeah, definitely to an extent, and I try not to let myself get
carried away. Yeah. Try to keep it practical.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, I definitely, it is a unique bond with some of these tools.
Yeah,
okay,
for
so
sure.
I think
I have my favorites.
But I think that goes all the way back, kind of what I was getting at a little bit before when I asked about the mass production. I mean, in your process, there's some, but I mean, like, I think if you were to talk to someone like, why buy this spoon instead of going to like Walmart and getting the silicone spoon for like $3,
or the cheap wood spoon,
right? But I think like the tools, right? And I think it's so cool that you're starting with a spoon, because a spoon, and especially like the spoons you're making are bigger. A lot of times they're like cooking spoons. They're not just like serving. Some of them are serving. Some of them are meant to be used to cooking. And I think that cooking is like a craft back into the house, right? That like everybody can have. There's such a social connection to that. So it's like when I cook with your spoon, I think about you.
Yeah.
And like, but that like you made it,
with
the intentionality
sure.
and the care, and then it makes me, and like I was saying with my Japanese knife, when I'm cooking things with that, a lot of times I'm not cooking things that are just speed, get through the day, like I gotta eat quick. Like there's a lot that goes into it. So having like tools and in the kitchen, making tools for the kitchen, which is such a personal thing, like the food we eat for people, I think is really interesting, and making something that people will use to build community in their family and with friends. And
and it goes back to what I was saying about choosing how I'm spending my time in the shop, and part of that is just surrounding myself with beautiful stuff as well. It's like I view, some people view their workshop as just they don't really put much intention into it. They just view the product they're making as kind of the end result and don't care about much of the other stuff that leads up to that. But I try to, get a full picture of the whole process, and it's like if I'm going to be down here 8 hours a day, I want it to be nice.
Well, I think the inspiration that's kind of what I've touched at with this whole series that we're working on, is like, to me, that is something that intrigues you. You want the process to be interesting. That's kind of why we got into beer. Like, we like the process of making things.
And you're creating your own world.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, like, I mean, we can't see this all on camera. And hopefully we'll get some other shots of your studio or whatever. But you have one of the nicest, most organized studios I've ever seen from an artist. And you can see that everything's been done with intent.
Yeah,
to serve your purposes, but also like your environment is inspirational, but it can also be chaotic. So if I can't work, if my workspace is way more busy than this, but if things are like out of place and this and that, I can't work. I got to get it all to where my mind is calm so that I can focus on what I'm doing.
Yeah, and that's I'm like that to an extreme, perhaps.
Yeah. No, I pick up on it too.
Yeah.
Having your workspace inspire you, having the things you surround yourself with, people are not exclusively individuals, right? Like they're you're a product of your environment. Well, you can choose what kind of things you surround yourself with, and that will reflect back in your work, I think. So who you surround yourself with, what quality, it's like why you might buy a craft beer instead of just a mass-produced beer, or why you might even seek out a specific craft beer because you have a connection there and there's something inspirational about what's going on with it and the story behind it.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about buying craft things is that
the people behind
it. I think behind it, it's like it's cool,
It is, a lot of it does have to do with the story and the person and whatever specific memory you have with the.
But that enriches life, right? It makes it not just getting through the thing you're doing. That when you can bring that into as many areas of your life as you can. I think it just enriches your life on a whole. So.
Yep. Yeah, and it's been fun. A lot of it takes place online and stuff like that, but it's been, as I've grown my own craft, it's fun to participate in the wider craft movement kind of and see how I can bring in other people's crafts into my daily life as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's been a huge part of it, and that it's very inspiring to just surround yourself as much as possible with craft items, really. And especially when you have, whether it's a friendship or anything like that, any meaningful story behind that.
Yeah. Especially with most of the stuff that we seem to interact with, is so mass produced.
Yeah.
There's a lot of our necessities in life or whatever. But I wanted to touch on your studio. We were just talking about that. Yeah. We're at your home as well. So that's one question I had as somebody that works from home a lot myself, and lots of artists work from home, whether it's out of necessity or out of preference. Yeah. Also, a lot of artists have a husband or a wife, or children, or in like your case, in my case, both.
Right.
Can you touch on a little bit, like what are some of the the best parts and advantages of working from home as a husband and father? And maybe we could start with that, but what are some of the hardest parts of working from home as a husband and father, because you never get to clock out of being dad, right?
That's right. Yeah. I really like being home to be able to help out as much as I can. I get, one of my favorite things to do is I get to take my son Otto to school every morning. And
I take my son Ryder to school as well every morning.
Yeah. And then I usually will have lunch with the family when he gets home from school and that kind of thing. And sometimes I can get a little edgy or a little cranky about work getting interrupted, but at the end of the day, I know that it's only good. It only gives me a proper balance of work life stuff. I definitely, I think if I didn't have my shop at home, I'd probably work too much and not be around the family as much. It's like forcing me to keep that balance, and it's ultimately much healthier for me to have that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I get upset sometimes about the knocks on the office door, too much or whatever, but in the end, I feel the same. They're the reason I'm doing stuff.
Exactly.
Or in the end, right? Yeah, I'm trying to I love working with Beards and Peter. I'm trying to create my own work life that I enjoy, for day to day. So I'm happy going to work, but in the end, that nothing comes above the kids, right? Or whatever.
Sloyd being a functional technique is interesting too. Having that at your house, right? Because that's part of what you're building, things that you use, and then they're giving back to you too. And so it makes it almost more personal if you were to just go to a workshop and your work was your work and then your home and it's separate, right? Whereas it's like so integrated.
Yeah,
into
the
your
family
life.
sees it. Yeah.
And it's like a functional, but it's not just the family sees it, but it's like a functional part of your life.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's finding that healthy balance, right?
Yep. And nothing beats just being able to cut my commute. I can just step downstairs in my jammies or whatever, and you know, I don't have.
Pretty awesome.
I've only seen Dawson not in flip flops 2 times. I've known for we've been communicating now for about a year and a half, maybe. So I've seen him twice not in flip flops. So that's a good thing. You're doing something right in life. If you can wear flip flops 95% of the time.
In Northern Michigan.
In Northern Michigan, yeah. He's in flip flops right now, by the way. You can't see that, but he is.
Yes.
Well, you know, one thing that I think I don't know if you had a lot more. I was kind of thinking we were maybe rolling towards the end, but one thing that we like to ask people is, you know, if you could make any beer, what would you make?
Oh boy. Well,
Would be a style. You don't have to be super specific.
Yeah, style.
You got a wheelhouse that you're really into, you know.
Well, I tend to go through phases. They may last 6 months or a year or 2 years. I'd say the past 6 or 8 months I've been on a pretty big New England IPA style kick. So something in that spectrum, most likely. A little hazy, a little something like that, probably.
Nice.
Awesome. What would you name it?
Off the top of your head, yeah.
I don't know if I could do. Jeez.
It's tough. I know.
Oh man. I don't know.
That takes a while. Yeah.
It's too much.
Fair enough. Well, thanks for indulging us. I think this is a fun one.
I have one more question I'd just like to ask. I think it's kind of a fun one, maybe 2, but
okay.
If you can think back in life to the very first, because we talk about, you know, being passionate about craft, right? That's one of you know, one of our sayings that we try to live through, like on the things that we work on and we produce, right? So the passion part, you know, probably before you even understood what the word passion meant or whatever, but can you remember the first thing or one of the first things in life that you were just all in on? Like you didn't realize that you had such a passion for it. Or, like for me, for example, it was drawing, you know. Once I figured out I could draw a little bit, I had something to do always as a kid, you know, and I just dove into it, and I drew every day. I know I did for, you know, most of my childhood.
Right.
I've interviewed somebody before, and it was something as obscure as rollerblading. They were just like all in on it. Can you recall something that just kind of took over your life and you were like happy to do? And I asked this based on, like, as a creator, you know, as an artist, like, especially for what you do, like, it's not just the finished product that we enjoy, it's the process, right? So when you're passionate about something, it's, you know, when people say, find something you love and you'll never work in your day, in your life, whatever, well, that's what that is, right? Where you, like, enjoy the process so much that, so is there something that you can recall from your early years?
I would say it's probably more bits and pieces, but the general theme would be kind of building stuff with my hands, with kind of a engineering, mechanical bent to it.
Yeah.
I was big into stuff, anything like Legos or erector set.
I was just gonna say, I was trying to think of a erector set, what that name was. Yeah. So you had some of those as a kid.
Stuff like that. I was
a treat for it.
Yeah.
I had tree fort. Yeah, I love building forts. I was always a huge MacGyver fan.
Yeah.
And I remember a little bit closer to the craft side of things. I remember doing some canoe trips with my family, and one of the uncles in the family having us do kind of make bows and arrow kind of type stuff, and I actually am still interested in that, and still like dabble a little bit here and there with making bows and that kind of thing.
That's cool.
And it was, I'll say this too, it was something it got set aside in my life for a long time too.
Sure.
Going through high school and into college, went on a much more academic path. that probably really wasn't the best idea. And
Sure.
I'm very happy that I made it back to working with my hands and that kind of thing.
That your answer right there kind of leads into the other question I like to ask about other artists and creators is about permission givers, because I'm sure that you had a chunk. You just say you had a chunk of your life where you went away from that.
Yep.
Probably like myself, because of the influences in my life that were telling me what was practical to do with my life, and just like society telling you, obviously you got to get a job, you got to make some money to do whatever. I had some people in my life that early on, luckily, told me that you can do something as an artist. They saw my talents and they were like, no, you can have a job doing this type of thing. You don't have to. Where my father was like literally telling me to get a factory job, as an auto worker, which is great. And my father did that, and he provided for our family and everything. But is there anybody in your life that specifically like led you to have almost the audacity to think that you could be one of the people in the world that go out there? I think about like musicians and like stage performers and stuff. And when you create something, even you take it back to your spoon. You create that spoon, you put it out there. You're putting it out there for critique, basically. You're putting it out. You know what I mean? So is there somebody, or maybe a couple people along the way, family member, teacher, or whatever, that like really opened up your eyes to the fact that you didn't have to go clock in, clock out somewhere, or even work for somebody else? You could build your own career on things that you enjoyed doing.
Yeah, I would say how that manifested was kind of coming to a breaking point where realizing like the academic stuff wasn't for me, and then having parents that were at least understanding to give me the benefit of the doubt. But then to be honest, it was more a growth of doing little things that ended up working out and kind of proving to myself in little steps that you can do other things, kind of a thing. It accrued over years, I would say, of like it was more proving to myself that it could happen. And it's like success begets success kind of thing. It's like you kind of take a risk here and there, and that works out, and it gives you the confidence to do like the next riskier thing, kind of that kind of mentality. And so I'd say it was more about people giving me the space and giving me the benefit of the doubt, and then me finding kind of
you got to get over your
myself.
own little self-doubt and the little voice in your head type thing.
And then other than that, there were certainly people I admired like within the craft and that kind of thing, but I haven't had too many strong personal relationships, just the whole nature of how the past few years have progressed. I just building a family and the craft kind of simultaneously. I don't get a ton of opportunities to get out and actually meet or hang out or spend much time with other craftspeople, and that is something I really value and look forward to doing more. I got before kid 1 and 2, or between kid 1 and 2, I got to do that a little bit more, and I'll be doing a little bit more in the future here. So it's extremely valuable. Is getting out. Even this type of thing, getting to actually sit down with some other craftspeople I find really valuable.
Yeah, I think the self-doubt that came up in the last interview too, and like giving yourself permission to create was a phrase that was uttered, which I thought was great, because like I came from a family of entrepreneurs, but like a lot of people in my generation, being a second, and some of our businesses being third generation, they were more manager types and continuing things going, whereas when I came to it, it was the easy thing would have been to just work for the family business. But like I don't, for whatever reason, I had this spark that like I could make something else go, right?
Yeah.
And I think, but you have to say, but it's scary to
It
jump
is.
when you
Sure.
have, especially if you have like fairly safe opportunity. It's scary to jump off the other way and say, I'm gonna do something that like nobody in my family,
Yeah.
like an industry that's totally different.
Yeah.
That is like gonna be me out there to make it work, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And but it's cool to do that, and I think encouraging people. And not everything works either. Like I've tried different things that don't work, and I think you can't quit there either.
No.
So
Yeah.
cool.
Well, it sounds like you had support from your parents early on, then, as far as.
Support from my parents. And yeah, that would have been early days, and definitely now and over the past, several years, that's been more my wife giving me.
Yeah.
I don't.
Well, I mean on like the self-doubt aspect, because we all have
Right.
little voice. in
Well,
our head.
there's a ton of
So-
that, but
No, I know you've actually used the term with me in previous discussions about imposter syndrome. Like, even though
Yeah.
you're very qualified at what you do, and you do a tremendous job, like you're still aware.
Yeah.
There's people out there. So the permission thing for me about like if there's people that give you permission to go and chase your dreams or whatever is more like my mom and dad probably are. I care about their opinions probably the most, right?
yeah.
So once they say it's okay, then it kind of frees you up. Like, I think a lot of artists, once they can get to the point where they don't really care what other people think, that's when the best work happens.
Yeah.
Because once you stop
Yeah.
worrying about, critics and outside viewers who half the time don't do any work themselves anyways, but we worry about what people think, right?
Yeah.
I can make a painting and then stress out about whether or not somebody else is gonna like it when it doesn't really matter, because it's all perceptive, right?
Yeah.
Like in the end. But so yeah,
That is, it does need to be said though. I don't know a ton of wives that if their husband came to them with, I want to carve spoons for a living, that would have been totally chill with that.
Yeah, outside of the parents, you're right. Yeah, my wife, God bless her soul, she's a saint. Like like Peter said, I've had different business ventures over the year and stuff. She's given me. I mean, she doesn't even get to park her car in the garage during the winter because that's my little shop right now.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Whatever. So you're right. Yeah. Thanks, Courtney. You're the best. Love you.
Yeah.
yeah. But spousal support is very.
It's huge.
It's
pretty
probably
key.
everything.
Yep.
Especially once you have children.
Exactly.
You have that whole load. So that's awesome.
Yep.
Kudos to your wife.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Well, what do you think?
Shall we call it a cheers?
Yeah. Let's.
All right, thanks, Dawson. We appreciate having you on the show. It was,
Thank you
I
for
think, a really
coming
good
out.
conversation.
Yeah. Here's the craft. Here's the Michigan
Yep.
Sloyd.
Cheers.
Oh yeah.
Tasty.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.